Hello and welcome all to the Forgotten OneCast. I am your host CJP, and we're going to take a bit of a musical journey over the next hour or so, and kind of give you some background and let you know who I am, where I kind of come from musically, and kind of what I really want to do with this show. And really, first to start off, I do want to thank everyone who's shown up in the chat so far. We've got Mr. Paul Hadouken, who will actually be my guest next week as we talk about self-recording. And then we've got, I'm going to be in the chat too myself. And of course, Dermy Wormy being himself, as usual. Thank you, Dermy. I appreciate you, son. I do. But I'm not late. So I can be neither gay nor late, because I was neither. I was right on time. Thank you very much. So, really to kind of get started, I am CJP. I've been a musician since I was, oh, good Lord, about 10 years old. I started out many, many moons ago. My mom was a vocalist, and my dad, he played a little bit of guitar, and it was actually my sister who really got me into playing. So, she kind of taught me my first guitar chords, my first drum beats, and really got me into what I wanted to do, which really was just to be a drummer. I grew up, listening to the Beatles and a lot of the music from the 60s and 70s, and I just couldn't help myself. I just fell in love with it, and that's just really what I wanted to do, and kind of did it for a long time. So see there's my tiny little skinny. See, there's actual photographic proof that me was actually fairly skinny as a child. So it happens. But so I started my musical journey young. Went through band as a kid, so played percussion, from junior high all the way through college. I transferred schools my junior year. Unfortunately, didn't have a marching band anymore, so I couldn't do that. But that was a lot of fun. Although I did find it really funny when I was in college, my first 2 years, that this is the picture that they used on the brochure, and not realizing that they're showing that we were such a small school, we had two different sets of quints, or actually quads. They weren't even quints at the time. And it was just really funny that, I'm here playing the really crappy set and he got the nice one. But thankfully the next year he left and I was the only one. So I was like, I ain't playing these pieces of crap anymore. I'm playing the nice ones. But, and yes, Dermy, I had hair. I still have hair. Look. There's still some there. It's just not as much as I used to have, but I always had a high forehead, so. And that's actually true. Honestly, I didn't actually go out on my first date until I was 20, but I was having way too much more fun in high school, being a nerd and playing music and, watching Star Trek and Star Wars and hanging with my friends and actually enjoying my high school years as opposed to, the drama and the parties and all that stuff. So I had a lot more of a chill high school experience, which was nice. So I played music all the way through high school, college. I played drums for a couple different churches over the years. I played in a couple of different bands over the years. In fact, one of the ones I played in, if I can find the picture. Where are you hiding? Where are you hiding? Says you are. This was a little red dirt band I played in the early aughts. It was not exactly my genre of music, but I did enjoy it. It was fun to play, and they were a fun group of musicians to play with, and I enjoyed my time there. Fortunately, didn't go very far, but with a lot of bands, they don't, unfortunately. And then currently I'm playing in a an '80s cover band, which is a lot of fun, and it actually got to check off one of my bucket list items, which I really really enjoyed doing. Uh, I got to play at Kane's Ballroom. It was for a private event, but I don't care if it was private or not. I got to play Kane's Ballroom, which that's a historic place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you've never heard of it, it's been around since the '30s. And in fact, I actually got to see the section of wall where in I think it was '79 the Sex Pistols played, and this wall was between the green room and the women's restroom. And Sid Vicious hopped up on whatever Sid Vicious usually was hopped up on, wanted to peep in on the girls in the restroom, so he literally punched a hole through the wall. And so they actually cut out that section of wall and have it framed in the office in the King's Ballroom, which I thought was a pretty fun little bit of history that I got to see. But yeah, so played through there. I've went to college for music, so I've been a classically trained musician since I was in college. Played in a couple of the different symphonies in the area. One for the first college I went to, and then later for the town that I lived in and still live in. It's it is what it is. So I played percussion, timpani, all that kind of stuff. Of course, I had to learn piano just enough to get myself through college because no matter what degree you're in, if you're a musician, if you're a vocalist, flautist, bassoonist, you play in the orchestra, celloist, all that, you still have to take piano because it is the easiest one to learn music theory on. And I agree with them on that point, but it was never my favorite instrument to play. But and then I learned mandolin for one song in the band I'm in currently, and kind of just took it from there. And it was just a lot of fun, to check it out and all that. So yes, thank you again and for being here. Um, let's see where to go from here. A lot of my musical influences, as I mentioned once before, the Beatles. That's really where I really kind of cut my teeth into wanting to be a drummer. And don't let anyone else fool you. Ringo Starr is actually a much better drummer than people think he is. Just because he wasn't playing flashy Neil Peart style runs, he was a pocket drummer, and that's really what I admired the most was the way he was able to stay within the groove of the song, fit what the song was doing, and the fact that he's left-handed, playing a right-handed kit. So his fills were always unique to what a right-handed drummer would play. And I really appreciated that quite a bit. Learning how he played and getting that done. And of course, the other biggest influence on me as a drummer was John Bonham from Led Zeppelin. Being able to play with power, but not as wild as Keith Moon was. He still got the point across of what he was trying to do without having to have to flail his arms, which I appreciate because I don't like to flail my arms because I look funny. I mean, funnier than I normally do. Um, but so I've listened to a lot of different genres of music, and what I usually tend to gravitate to most of the time though is progressive rock. That's really kind of um what I listened to, especially in college. I had my advisor really got me into more of the prog rock than what I listened to as a kid. So Yes was obviously a huge part of that. Listened to a little bit of ELP, as my dad had the album Tarkus and Brain Salad Surgery, which I loved. But he got me into listening to Gabriel era Genesis, which led into King Crimson, which led into Gentle Giant, and really just loving that genre of taking the classical form but putting it in a rock idiom is the best way to explain it. Playing classical styles, classical passages, having songs that have multiple sections that lead into each other. Um, that's really what I enjoyed. because it again, when you have to go through college and you have to listen to classical and you have to listen to Baroque and everything that comes with that specific genre of music, you really you enjoy the musicianship of the orchestra, and then seeing that translated in guitar, bass, and drums and keyboard. It's just fascinating to me. I love being able to just sit back and listen to a song that's 18 to 20 minutes long and being taken on a journey. Which doesn't mean preclude that I don't like, general rock. I grew up in the '80s, so obviously I listened to a lot of rock. Not only from glam to hair metal to heavy metal, just regular rock, soft rock, alternative rock when it hit the '90s when I was in junior high. Um, and of course, in the grunge era, which when I was in junior high and high school, I was more of a Soundgarden guy. I really liked Soundgarden, and then as I got older, really started to enjoy Alice in Chains and and the real dark harmonies that they were able to produce over the years. But yeah, really for my biggest influences, it would be Ringo Starr and John Bonham. I can't say much on guitar because I'm not really a guitarist in that sense. I'm more of a I just play guitar. I'm a percussionist by heart, and that's what that's like my first best destiny, as Spock once told to Kirk. No, no, no devil, no. No, because no one wants to see me in a thong twerking because I would get yeeted off of YouTube faster than anything on the planet. It'd be like Sonic the Hedgehog, gone. But thank you for dropping by. That's Devil Made Me Do It. He's a member of the Legion of Memers and has his own show called Get Ranked, which is on Sundays. So check that out. And of course, Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't drink, Dermy. I'm not like you. I'm not like you, Dermy. I'm just not. But also, Dermy Wormy has a show called Ball Busters. It's on Friday night, so check him out as well. And then, so within the last probably 2 or 3 years, I really got into jazz fusion, which is kind of an odd thing to think about because it's all mainly jazz fusion from Japan in the late '70s, early '80s. And when I first got recommended to it through the YouTube algorithm, which sometimes can do a cool thing, you never know when that actually might show you something really good. It reminded me a lot of kind of the jazz fusion that my dad would listen to that I didn't know what it was called at the time. But it was like bands like Passport was another one that I had remembered from that time. I believe they're out of Germany, if I remember right. Yes, yeah. German jazz band formed in 1970 by Klaus Doldinger, known as Passport from 1971. So yeah, that's that was kind of my introduction. Listen to a lot of that. Caldera, Chuck Corea, um, Crusaders was another just fantastic group from the '70s and early '80s. They had a song called "Sweet and Sour" that was just on my constant rotation when I was younger. And it's just one of those songs. It's just it also takes you on a journey because it gives everyone a chance to solo. So there's a great keyboard solo, there's a sax solo, guitar solo. It's just one of those it's a song that you can't not bop to. I would love to play it, but obviously YouTube would nail me for copyright, which is unfortunate because this is a music podcast and I would like to actually play some music. But I don't have that option unless I play my own stuff, which I'm not sure if you guys want to actually hear or not. But we can always pull up a track or two and show kind of what stuff that I've worked on over the years. But as far as other instrumentations that something I'd like to learn. I'd like to learn banjo. Oddly enough, I grew up watching Steve Martin, and I was amazed at his technique. For especially for being a comedian, you wouldn't expect a comedian to be that good at an instrument. Um, so yeah, I'd like to learn banjo. I don't know if there's anything else I'd really like to learn. Maybe a French horn, but I think I may be too late in life to learn how to play a French horn. Plus, they're expensive. They're an expensive, expensive instrument. But I do love the sound of them, especially the way John Williams uses them. Um, so yeah, so there's that. I love the jazz fusion. I love orchestral soundtracks. Especially again, mentioned John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, James Horner, Basil Poledouris. Um, there hasn't really been anyone lately that I've just really latched onto. Unfortunately, because it seems like a kind of what happened in the '60s and '70s, especially in the '70s, is orchestral sound, backing for movies kind of just went by the wayside for the pop and rock of the day, and then of course Star Wars comes out in '77, and all of a sudden everyone's doing orchestral soundtracks again. So it's kind of been waning. And I think a lot of that is also just the fact that not as many people are going into film composing for that, because it's so much easier now to compose. One person can sit with synthesizers and VSTs and make an entire orchestral soundtrack, without having to actually have an orchestra with them. So technology has made that a whole lot different. But and then also, if you guys have any questions in the chat, pop them up, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can without boring you or making you go crazy. But in fact, let's put some backing music on here just to, so it's not just me playing and talking. I got my daughter's watching, but she's doesn't want to pop into the chat, so she's just asking questions on my phone. So thank you, Sarah. I love you. Thank you for watching. Um, she asked me if there's any artists that I've taken liking to from the last 20 years, I guess. Muse, I've really liked Muse. I really like the way they craft their songs, although they do have a tendency to kind of directly homage things. It's a little weird, but especially their early 2000s stuff was just fantastic music. But Muse, I like Breaking Benjamin, Shinedown, Alter Bridge is really good. Dream Theater, absolutely love Dream Theater, because I think they really kind of pick up the mantle from where Yes and Rush left off, and if you kept that going over the years. Oh, and that's Mr. Moss. We call him Tulsa. He's the bass player in the '80s cover band that I do. Fantastic bass player. Not so much on the drums. He's a fantastic bass player, and fantastic martial arts. He can kick my butt pretty much Sunday. Most unique instrument I play. Well, aside from mandolin, I learned for the one song and just kind of keep going. I'm pretty goddamn good with a kazoo, actually. Since there's a couple of songs where it's the '80s, so there's saxophone, and you kind of need to have a saxophone player, and I'm not a saxophone player, and I can't really do saxophone while playing guitar. One of those things you can't do at the same time. But I decided, we could use a kazoo on it, add a little bit of distortion. Sounds just like a saxophone. You can put Jack Black on it, and just have fun. Yeah, so those are kind of the I had. And I'm also just kind of albums that I played on. It's like those movies that you watch over and over again. It doesn't matter how many times you listen to it. Like Eye in the Sky by Alan Parsons Project, I've listened to that I don't know how many times over the last 40 years. That serious combination with the title track, it's just plus the fact that the intro song was used for the Bulls intro in the NBA for the Jordan tribute for the night. But so that's an album I've listened to 100 times. Oh, am I cutting out? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, is there anybody in there? Just nod if you can hear me. Is there anyone home? Not usually, no. Um, having trouble with the music. We'll turn the music off then. Guess you just never know. This is my first time running a live stream, so I'm obviously going to have technical issues and glitches. It just happens. It happens all the time. I'm not exactly sure why technology and I have such a horrible relationship, but it is what it is. Let's see. Other albums I've listened to hundreds of times. The first Asia album. I mean, yeah, I know there's the joke in the 40-year-old virgin, How do I know you're a virgin? You got a framed Asia poster. But that first album is fantastic. I mean, think about who was on that album, and that's John Wetton from UK, Carl Palmer from ELP, Jeffrey Downs from the Buggles, and Yes, and then you had Steve Howe from Yes. I mean, come on, that's just a hellaciously good lineup of musicians. Playing actual pop songs, but they're still, you can still feel that prog DNA in the group. So yeah, the first Asia album I've loved. Alien Ant Farm, their second album, actually not the one with Smooth Criminal on it, which is criminally underrated cover. But their second album's really, really good too. Truant, I think is the name of it, if I remember right. I'm looking up here, something here. And then of course, other things I do, is I actually I'm a memer. I make memes because memes are funny. They're the new language of satire. Which I'm also a member of the Legion of Memers, so they have a live stream on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Central Time. So definitely check them out. They're always good for a laugh. So a meme I made several years ago, actually, and I don't know how many people actually got the joke. Let's see if you guys get the joke. Yes, Lionel Richie. And if anyone can guess what movie this is from, that's bonus points. Oh yeah, their first album is great. It really is. I really love their second one, especially Tia Lupe. Just you don't hear songs in 7/8 very often, unless you're listening to prog rock. And of course, then they go into 9/8 and 13/16 and 11/18 and all sorts of weird stuff. Oh, she decided to come out of the shadows. That's my daughter, Sarah, who's also a musician. She plays bass in the orchestra. So, taking a little bit after old Poppy. Makes the Poppy proud. Makes the Poppy proud. But yeah, I thought this was a funny joke. But that's just me, because I got a weird sense of humor. And then of course, this one, also cracked me up quite a bit, because I just couldn't help myself. Saw this in an episode of Star Trek: The Animated Series. I'm like, that just looks like an album cover. Like McCoy's getting ready to throw down some hellacious beats and rhymes, man. I mean, I'm just waiting for the him to start spitting some of that homespun fire, if I can say it correctly. I would think that would be hilarious. Make an actual rap album done by Dr. McCoy. Of course, at least half the tracks would be I'm a doctor, not a insert, thing here. But yeah, so again, really, this is just kind of an introduction to what I do. Who I am. And again, if you have any more questions, pop them in the chat. I love the that interaction. I like to talk to people, and again, next week we're gonna have Mr. Paul Hadouken on, who's been very active in the chat. Thank you, Mr. Hadouken. Let's see. Yeah, of course, Beatles, obviously. You know, I don't think there's an album theirs I don't like. No, there's not. No, there's not at all. And I was trying to find there was an album that my dad had that I couldn't really find much information on. So if anyone out there knows, I would love to learn more about this group. And I'll share my screen so you can see what I'm looking at. This is the best of El Rocho's biggest hits by El Rocho. And that was literally their only album. It's just weird to me. I mean, that takes some really big balls. If you think about it, to name your first album the best of El Rocho's biggest hits. I mean, I have to admire them for that gumption, but it's just one of those things. I'm the only thing I've ever found on it was a blurb about them opening for Three Dog Night, I think in 74, which I'm pretty sure my dad went to that concert because he was living in Tulsa at the time. But, Paul asks, best era of music. That's really hard to say because depending on what genre you're talking about, it could be several, but the 80s in general, I think had the widest range of music that was good and popular. I mean, because you not only had your rock, your AC/DCs, Def Leppards, Van Halen's, all of those groups. You had all the new wave stuff that was coming out of England in the especially in the late 70s, early 80s. Your Gary Newmans, Buggles, you had the Knack coming out of that time. Gary Glitter, for however weird he was, the New York Dolls. But then you had, such great R&B. You had, hip hop was just took off in that decade, all the way from, starting, like Rapper's Delight, all the way through, the NWA towards the end. And, I mean, you had, pop from, female pop stars, you had female rock stars, you had, every color under the sun was making music and people were just enjoying it. It was just fun music. And I just can't get over in my head how many multiple genres came out in that era, in that decade, and just how much of it is, people still sing and love to this day. I mean, there's not as much, from the 60s and 70s that have lasted as long as what has from the 80s. Of course, part of that is, us Gen Xers were being the ones that were kind of, that's what we grew up with. So of course, now we've got disposable income, so they're kind of, bringing a lot of that stuff back and, putting in movies and stuff and trying to, buy our affections with nostalgia. I can't, fault them for that because, heck, I can still listen to Never Gonna Give You Up however many times they want to. I don't care about getting rickrolled. I love that song. No. Other than Double Fantasy, which is a good album, which was Lennon's last one, Yoko on her own, there's just something about her that sets my teeth on edge. And a lot of it, I believe, has to do with how she handled the estate after John's murder. Because I watched a Behind the Music with Julian Lennon, who's someone who got really screwed over by the music industry back in the 80s. And he was talking a lot about, how him and his family got nothing pretty much from the estate. And it wasn't the money he was worried about. He wanted, other things that, his dad had collected over the years, things to remember him, more personal memories in those types of things. And then Yoko couldn't even be bothered to be on the show. She had her lawyer. And you know how I know her lawyer is extremely well paid? He was tanner than Hulk Hogan and had teeth whiter than the sun on its hottest day. It was like blinding white. Like if you walked into a club with a black light on, that would be all you would see is teeth. And he was one of those like, well, they got paid very, very handsomely from the estate. So yeah, Yoko can take a flying leap. Now, if you really want the best analysis of Yoko Ono, all you got to do is go to YouTube, type in Bill Burr, John Lennon, and he talks about uh, the Dick Cavett show. I think it was in 75. I'm not sure on the date. It's sometimes in the mid 70s. And John and Yoko were hosting for like a week or something like that. And they had Chuck Berry come on, who was one of John Lennon's heroes, one of his main influences as a musician. And so you've got John Lennon and Chuck Berry on stage together playing music. This is a massively historic moment in music history. Yoko Ono is in the back playing on a drum, just doing her thing. And I guess she was angry that she wasn't getting enough attention. So she picks up the mic off the stand and then just starts making horrific, like whale noises in it. And Bill Burr pauses on Chuck Berry's face, and you can see his eyes bulging. You can see his jaw clenching. And you can see that he really wants to stop what they're doing and smack her. I can just tell. Just Chuck Berry's kind of that guy. But he went on and kept playing the song. And then they come back and sometime later in the show and they do another song. You see Yoko, you see microphone, you see mouth moving, no sound. So I'm assuming that Mr. Berry threatened a sound engineer that if he hears her, someone gonna die that night. On the current state of music, a lot of it, the problem is you have so many fingers in the pies on these albums now. You know, you look like something like Beyonce, and there's like 5 different producers and 8, 9 different writers. When you look at something like Bohemian Rhapsody, one person wrote that, Freddie Mercury. What songs have stood the test of time longer, Bohemian Rhapsody or Beyonce? Other than the joke of all the single ladies, Bohemian Rhapsody is going to win its hands down. So, and a lot of it is also the technology. There's no limitations on technology now. You can have 500 tracks if you want. And you've got VSTs that can mimic just about anything. So I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is because it's all programmed music now. There's not a lot of people that are being individual and breaking through just because of how much of a tight fist hold that they have on the music industry. I mean, if you look like, you know, the top people streaming on Spotify, you know, you have to break 1 million just to be even slightly put in the algorithm. But yeah, you know, 80s. That's right, honey. It is the best decade of music. I can understand dying on that hill. There's just way too many options for things to listen to. And you know, it wasn't one of those things also, especially now, you know, if you listen to country, you're a redneck. If you listen to hip hop, you're a thug. You know, there wasn't that division back then. You know, that I could listen to R&B and hip hop, and I could listen to rock, and I could listen to pop. I could listen to, you know, just about anything. And no one looked at you weird if you liked it. It's like, you know, especially, you know, for music for, you know, a different race than me. You know, back in the 80s, they wanted you to listen. They wanted everybody to listen. They didn't want to say to, you know, a certain population, you know, this music wasn't made for you. No, that music was made for everybody. And that's why it's endured so much, because anybody could listen to it. And you dang right, Mr. Hadouken. She's a smart kid. She's a very smart kid. So yeah, so back to the El Rocho thing. I couldn't figure this one out. I didn't understand, you know, why that was there, why they did that. I didn't understand it. But and this list that we're looking at here, these are actually the LPs that mostly were my dad's. Some of my mom's, a few were mine that I've added over the years. But most of this is what I listened to growing up. I'm not been a guinea pig. I mean, I'm chunky like one. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. Like this is an album that, well, I'm not sure if I can show this on YouTube, but the first this Sleep Backward album was really really good. It's just it didn't have Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks on it, so it wasn't it was before they really hit it with Rumors. Um, this album, Focus, Moving Waves. If you want, if you really want to hear some crazy music from Europe, I've never had a song where yodeling was involved that wasn't presented as a joke that I enjoyed so much. The riff in this song is sick. The guitar playing, Jan Ackerman, is just fantastic. Interdispersed with the lead singer yodeling, literally yodeling. It was like it's like a Lord of the Rings Hobbit acid trip. Is the best way I could describe this. Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah. Well, yeah, the whole reason I transferred schools was the college I ended up going to. They didn't have a music program when I started college, and one of my mentors in high school became the director there, and he wanted to start a music program. So he actually got all of my credits to transfer. Uh, I got a sweetheart deal on tuition, and of course, it was back in my hometown, so I could just stay with my parents and not had to pay room and board. Although I didn't think I was getting married at the time, which was part of the decision, and that ended up falling through pretty badly. But it was nice to be able to finish my degree in 4 years instead of 5. I enjoyed that quite a bit. But yeah, I Focus. I highly recommend them. Yeah, of course you can't go wrong with Zappa. I mean, that man was just a musical genius. Kind of abrupt, but a musical genius. And I do love the fact that he made Tipper Gore and everyone on the PRMC panel in the 90s look like absolute morons, which is why the first album to actually get an explicit content sticker, not explicit lyrics, but explicit content, was Jazz from Hell by Frank Zappa. The problem with that is that it's a completely instrumental album. There's no lyrics, no words, no dialogue, nothing. And that was just them being petty by the fact that he made them look dumb. Which I found that really funny. I couldn't not laugh at that. Another one of the prog rock albums that I really loved quite a bit. And I love this cover. The fact that, and that's the other thing that I really miss, in this digital age is, and I know vinyl is a thing now, but album covers have gotten just so bland over the years. Just really hasn't been any good ones that I can just point to and look and say, that really looks cool. But I mean, they used to do these intricate, awesome album covers because that's what sold you. I mean, you walked into the record store and you're flipping through and you see this jar shaped album with an octopus in it. And you're like, I wonder what that sounds like. And I kind of miss those days because, the YouTube algorithm tries to do that, but it really doesn't have that same tactile feel that you would have for that kind of thing. The Great Who, Heart. This is another album I listen to quite a bit. I always thought 1980 would actually make a great marching band opener. But yeah, Rise is a fantastic song. There's just something about instrumental music where you can just kind of let it go and in the background and just you kind of turn your mind off for a while and just follow. There's just something about that I really love. I think I found this one at a flea market one time, but it was Hagar, Sean Aronson, and Michael Shrevey. So it's kind of a mix of people from Journey, Santana, and of course Sammy Hagar. Well, you know what? Hail to you, brother. E-Type Queen is the place to be reviews. He's got 3 shows a week, as well as morning shows and other videos that he does. And he's got another channel where he talks about horror and fun stories. Kind of the creepy urban legend stuff. But yeah, I'm on his channel for those 3 main shows, and he's been very, very kind to me and very, very generous on letting me, get my YouTube feet wet, as it were. Because I believe his was the first show I streamed on, other than the Legion of Memers meme stream. So, hail Etep, you're good. You're a good man, son. You're a good man. But yeah, if anyone's any more questions, I'm gonna be able to end this a little early, because there's really not much to talk about until we have some other people to talk to. Which I'm really looking forward to having Paul on, because he's another person who does music on his own, and knows the trials and tribulations of trying to record on your own, which is always fun, always a blast to hint try to do. Swig for the working man, because my throat's kind of getting dry. I'm not used to talking on my own like this for an hour on end. Kind of strange, but I kind of like it actually. It's kind of fun. James Game. John Luke Ponte. It's another one of those kind of French jazz fusion that my dad listened to quite a bit when I was younger. Jethro Tull, another just fantastic band that I say what you will about Aqualung and just kind of how creepy the lyrics are. That song is just fire. It's a lot of fun to play and sing, but I can't play the flute on it. I just can't. I'm not a flautist at all. I never tried. I think I would probably be pretty horrible at it. And John Mayall's and the Blues Breakers, and I do love blues too, quite a bit. I just don't have as much of it on LP because that wasn't what my dad really was into. Kansas, Carry On My Wayward Son, Dust in the Wind. I mean, fantastic. The Kinks, the Knack. Of course, Led Zeppelin. Can't not have Led Zeppelin. Again, Bon is one of my hugest influences as a drummer. The fact that he was 19 years old when they wrote that first album, and just one of those drummers that you just can't really compare him to anyone else because he just had such a unique style. But 19 years old, and the bass drum work on Good Times, Bad Times, especially when that was a 28-inch bass drum that he was playing on, it blows my mind. Yeah, I put it on 97.5. If for those of you who don't know, 97.5 KMOD in Tulsa. It's a rock station that's been around for, oh, good Lord, going on, I think 50 years. And, they've always been good about playing, not only, the classic stuff, but, playing newer artists and, doing a lot of stuff like that. Although I do miss their morning show with Phil and Brent, because that's where Roy D. Mercer came from. And if you haven't heard of Roy D. Mercer, look up Roy D. Mercer. That's some of the best prank calling you'll ever hear. Well, I mean, there's a lot more stuff they got away with back in the 80s and 70s because there wasn't a social media to categorize and catalog the shenanigans that people got up to back then. So it's every bit as toxic as it is now, but there's not Big Brother 24/7 watching what you're doing. I'm pretty sure. I mean, Steven Tyler got in trouble for stuff he put into a memoir because it was stuff that was acceptable back in the day. Nobody talked about it. I mean, Ted Nugent talked about the fact that he didn't drink, he didn't do drugs, but he liked the ladies quite a bit, and since he was famous, he had access. So, although I do think a lot of again, what made the '80s was great was the cocaine. There's just no way around it. I mean, you look at not only the music, but the TV shows and the movies and the books that were coming out in the '80s. There was a lot of cocaine use going on. There's just no way around it. And I think that's what fueled some of the wild, weird ideas that came out during that decade. But yeah, Little Feat. That's another band I don't think a lot of people ever talk about, which I really liked a lot of their stuff. But they came back in the an album in the '80s. It was really, really good. I think it was Let It Roll. Was the one I was thinking of. Yeah, Let It Roll. But yeah, and then they were more of a, I guess you say, Southern rock genre. But yeah, and then Time Exposure. This album, fantastic album by Little River Band. Night Owls. Take It Easy. I mean, there's just such a great selection of songs on this, and then they came out of more of the pop side of the rock genre. And of course, there's the South Park joke. Didn't you know that song by Loverboy? A pig and an elephant DNA just one splice. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I love that joke. Love that joke. It's so much fun. Marshall Tucker. Oh, Men at Work. Oh, I loved Men at Work in the 80s. Midnight Oil as well. I really liked them. That's something that you don't really hear about a lot. There's really not a lot of rock that's crossed over from Australia in the last few years, or at least really the last couple of decades that I can think of. Because the only bands I know of from Australia was Midnight Oil, Men at Work, and In Excess, and this is all '80s, pretty much. And yes, Tulsa, I do have a Nazareth album. How could I not have Nazareth? Except this mine doesn't have the promotional copy listed on it. Oh, then of course, yeah, you couldn't grow up in the '80s and not have this album. You just couldn't. And I will admit, she was probably my first, boy crush when I was younger, because that came out, right when I was, cognizant of, that there were, differences between men and women. Her and Princess Leia. Definitely Princess Leia. Yeah, I gotta have my Ozzy Osbourne. Pablo Cruz is another one of those kind of jazzy style bands that I really liked. Well, they're not as much jazz, but ooh, that's a tough one because there's so much music that I love that I would love to get a chance to play with, an actual band. Um, I don't know if I actually have a specific song because there's again, you going all the way back to the '40s. There's just so much good music that I've grown up listening to over the years that I'm not sure if I could actually pin it down to one song. I really don't. That's a great question, though. I love that question. There's another album I really liked that my dad had. And of course, the joke of the title is the fact that it is an instrumental album. I mean, there literally isn't a word. of lyric in it. And it's another one of those. It's kind of jazzy a little bit as well because it's got especially some differently odd time metered stuff in Foxfire is what, if you ever Googled Pete Carr Foxfire, definitely a song worth listening to. And thank you, Wayne's World. Yes, this did come in every mailbox along with samples of Tide. Everyone in America, I think, had this album. I think everybody. Even in like the smallest towns in like rural Arkansas, someone had this album. And of course, you can't not have Philip Bailey from Commodores with Easy Lover. That one may be the one I'd like to play drums on because it's just that was such a tasty drum part. Phil Collins, I don't think really Phil Collins gets his due as a drummer, very honestly. Because everyone thinks of him as the, I can hear it calling the air tonight, front man for Genesis, but he really wasn't a fantastic drummer and also left-handed. Especially if you listen to any of the Selling England by the Pound or Foxtrot. Some of the drumming on that is just incredible, especially the live version of Firth of Fifth. And Poco, if I remember right, Poco, that was the band with the second bass player for the Eagles was in that. I cannot remember his name for the life of me. What was his name? No, it wasn't that one. What album was that? I may be misremembering that. You can't hold me to it 100%, okay? Okay. What was his name? He's not even listed on here. I cannot remember that guy's name. Yeah, well, moving on. And yes, I have Quarter Flash. And of course, you can't not have Queen. But although in Queen's entire catalog, I think actually my favorite song that they ever recorded was The Show Must Go On. And a lot of it is not just because it was such a fantastic song, but it was recorded not long before Freddie passed. And he was already quite sick at the time. Came in, took a glass of wine, and did the song in one take. One. And it's one of his, I think, most incredible vocal performances. But the fact that he was so sick at the time and still was able to pull that out is just awe-inspiring to get that kind of response from somebody. Ray Parker Jr.? Why not have Ray Parker Jr.? I mean, come on, Ghostbusters? That's a great, great song. Although it is I Want a New Drug at the same time. And he sued and lost for that. And this is another one of those albums that I've listened to over and over again. Just because of how well it was put together. And the fact that, a lot of it was different members of Yes and other bands that he had played with coming in and just playing what his interpretation of what he thought their personalities were. Not necessarily, their life in general, but just what he thought of their personality. But yeah, huge Rick Wakeman fan. Of course, I remember when I used to work at Guitar Center back in the late 2000s. And they had these certifications that you could get as a salesperson, to try to increase your knowledge and other things like that. And in the pro audio section, you had to basically write an essay about a synthesizer or, something like that. So I did research on the Mellotron, which I've always loved that sound. And if you're not familiar with the Mellotron, pull up Strawberry Fields Forever. The flute sound in that was not an actual flute, it was a mellotron. And the mellotron was really the first sampler that was commercially available. And so instead of, having, as a piano having strings or anything like that, the key was hooked to a tape loop. And it was, I think 8 seconds was the maximum. And of course, it's, mid 70s technology. So it was, finicky and very fragile. So Rick Wakeman famously had told the story that he got so fed up with his mellotron that he literally took it out in a field and lit it on fire. Lit it on fire. He hated it that much because of all the times it would fail on him. Of course, I think he's probably regretting that now because it's probably actually worth some money now because it's vintage technology. But yes, Jason Holt. Hey, thanks for joining. Oh yeah, Moody Blues. And that's one of the things I was thinking about when it came to recording, and how many tracks and things we have available now, and just when you watch video or documentaries about songs that were recorded back in the 60s and 70s, and just the fact that especially the Beatles, you can tell when they went from 4 tracks to 8 tracks, because they had more options. But I honestly think that those limitations created a lot more creativity for being able to record and having to come up with different ways to make things work when you only have 8 tracks to work with, or 16 or 24. Now you have unlimited. So there's something to be said for having that limitation. I think the same works for movies too. Having these bloated $300-400 million budgets, and then you have movies that have like 16 that do every bit as well. But I think I prefer those smaller budget movies sometimes, because they know how they have a limitation, so they have to work with what they got, and they can get very, very creative when they have to work with what they got. So, all right, well, we're coming up on an hour. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer. I want to thank everyone who had joined in. So you had Paul Hadouken, Mr. Dermy Wormy, Beelzehub, which is Devil Made Me Do It, John Tulsa Moss, my daughter Sarah. Thank you so much for joining, honey. ETEP's the Place to Be Reviews, Jason Holt. Thank you, everyone who watched. And if you haven't, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to try to do these once a week on Thursdays at 7. Like I said, next week we have Mr. Paul Hadouken on. So we'll have a conversation about self-recording and, kind of how that's changed over the years. And I love you too, honey. You're awesome. So with that, I am CJP. This has been the Forgotten OneCast. See you guys next week. Don't stop playing.